Imagine you're walking across a super busy college campus, and up ahead, you see a guy just sort of slumped in a doorway.
Oh, like he's clearly in distress.
Yeah, coughing, groaning, the whole thing. Do you stop to help him?
I mean, I'd like to think I would. Most of us would say yes, right?
Yep.
We assume our deeply held moral compass is what drives us.
Right. But what if I told you that whether you actually stop has, like, almost nothing to do with your morals?
Wait, really?
Yeah. It has absolutely everything to do with a single, completely invisible situational factor that you aren't even aware of.
Wow. Okay, that is wild.
It totally changes the game. And today, we are dismantling basically everything you think you know about human drive, ambition, and innovation. Welcome to this deep dive into the Entrepreneurial Mindset Advantage by Gary G. Schoeniger.
It's a fantastic book.
It really is. So if you're sitting there right now feeling just totally overwhelmed by the sheer pace of change today, or you're wondering how you're supposed to avoid obsolescence without burning out, this deep dive is going to hand you a completely different framework.
And we should clarify, our mission here is not to teach you how to become, like, the next Silicon Valley billionaire.
Definitely not. Or how to write some 50-page business plan to pitch to venture capitalists.
Far from it.
We're going to uncover a hidden logic, a really practical mindset that anyone can use to navigate this incredibly unpredictable world we live in. Whether you want to, start a side hustle, reinvent your career, or just be an irreplaceable problem solver.
It really is the ultimate toolkit for the modern age.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this.
We really need a profound paradigm shift here. And to start, we have to look at who actually becomes an entrepreneur. I mean, if these skills like adaptability, problem solving, resilience are so vital for surviving the future of work, why do we collectively assume only a select few people can do it?
It's that whole cultural obsession with the great man theory.
Yes, exactly.
We get sold this narrative that, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk were just born with some mythical DNA that the rest of us just lack.
Right. And we even take all these personality tests, like Myers-Briggs, to try and figure out if we have the right traits to be innovative.
But the research Schoeniger pulls together in the book completely debunks this. It turns out relying on personality tests to predict entrepreneurial success has basically no scientific basis.
None at all. And leaning on those traits leads us directly into this massive psychological trap. It's called the fundamental attribution error.
Oh, I love this concept.
It's so important. It's our human tendency to attribute someone's behavior to their innate personality, while we just completely ignore the situational factors that are actually acting on them.
Which brings us right back to that guy slumped in the doorway.
Right.
There's this brilliant study, the author mentions the Good Samaritan experiment by Darley and Batson, and it perfectly illustrates this error.
Oh, the seminary student one?
Yeah, the researchers took a group of seminary students. So, these are people literally dedicating their entire lives to being moral, religious leaders.
You can't get a group with stronger espoused values than that.
Exactly. They asked them to prepare a sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan. But here's the trick. They told half the students they were running late and had to rush across campus, and the other half were told they had plenty of time.
And then on their way across campus, every single student had to walk past an actor.
Yes, an actor who was slumped over in an alley, groaning and coughing.
So you would think that personality and these deeply held moral beliefs would dictate who stopped to help, right?
You'd think. They were literally on their way to give a speech about helping a stranger, but no. The single biggest factor was the situation.
Wow.
The students who thought they were running late just rushed right past the person in need. The perceived time pressure, the situation itself, completely overrode their inherent traits.
What's fascinating here is how this psychological mechanism applies directly to everyday entrepreneurs. We assume they succeed because of some, innate genetic predisposition to take massive risks.
Right.
But the data actually shows they don't succeed in spite of their constrained circumstances. They succeed because of them.
The situation forces the innovation.
Exactly. The situation activates the behavior. In fact, Peter Drucker, the legendary management consultant, he observed that successful entrepreneurs are absolutely not thrill-seeking risk takers. They actually spend all their energy actively trying to minimize risk.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
Because we are constantly fed stories of the bold visionary betting it all, people remortgaging their houses or draining their life savings to fund some crazy startup. How can you look at that behavior and say they aren't taking huge risks?
Well, because we're confusing the external appearance of the action with the internal calculus of the actor.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
To an outsider, quitting a stable job looks incredibly risky. But to the entrepreneur who has probably spent months gathering evidence, running small tests, and realizing their current job is a dead end staying put is actually the bigger risk.
Okay, I see. We tend to view entrepreneurs as skydivers who just love the thrill of the fall. But according to this research, they're actually more like structural engineers.
I love that analogy.
They check the wind, they calculate the load, and they rigorously test the materials before they ever step onto the bridge.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And very often, they are operating from sheer necessity, not just a desire for wealth.
Take the story of Dawn Halfaker.
Oh, that's such a powerful story.
It really is. She was a young military police officer serving in Iraq, and her Humvee got hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. She wakes up at Walter Reed Hospital and finds out her right arm had been amputated.
Just devastating.
She told the author she thought her life was totally over, and she understandably felt really sorry for herself. But then, one day in rehab, she saw a young staff sergeant who had lost both of his legs, and he was just fiercely struggling to take his first steps on his new prosthetics.
And that was the situational trigger. Her mindset shifted instantly.
Right. She realized, she was just missing an arm. And here's the key takeaway. She didn't set out to build a massive business out of a love of risk.
No, not at all.
She needed to survive, and she had this burning desire to protect her fellow soldiers who were still deployed over there. So she literally sat down at her dining room table with just a laptop and a business card, and she started a consulting firm.
Leveraging her battlefield experience to influence policymakers.
Exactly. It was born entirely out of survival, empathy, and necessity.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it begs a pretty massive question for the listener.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurial mindset is an innate human capability, like a natural response to constraints and a desire to solve problems. Why do we feel so paralyzed? Like, why isn't everyone utilizing it?
Because we are swimming in a system specifically designed to suppress it.
Yes.
It reminds me of that famous David Foster Wallace parable. Have you heard that one?
But what about the fish?
Yeah. Two young fish are swimming along, and an older fish swims past and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit until one looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?"
Exactly. We don't see the historical systems that surround us. And for us, that water is the managerial mindset.
So true.
To understand why we think the way we do, you have to look back at the history of work. I mean, before the Industrial Revolution, humans lived by exchanging. You were a farmer, a blacksmith, a tradesperson.
You were inherently entrepreneurial.
Exactly. But then came mass production.
Adam Smith's famous pin factory. He realized that if you break the creation of a pin into 10 tiny, hyper-specialized tasks and assign one person to each task, production just skyrockets.
But that explosive efficiency came with a really profound cognitive cost.
It did.
Frederick Winslow Taylor took Smith's idea to the absolute extreme with what he called scientific management. Taylor literally stood over factory workers with a stopwatch, calculating their exact micro movements.
That sounds miserable.
It was. His core stated belief was that the worker's job was not to think. Their job was strictly to execute calculated movements designed by management.
And that created this deeply ingrained managerial mindset. It's a system that values efficiency, routine, and external control above basically everything else.
Right.
And we didn't just leave it in the factories, did we? We copy-pasted it right into our schools. We started treating students like products on an assembly line. Ring the bell, move to the next station, memorize these exact facts, take the standardized test.
Which is incredibly dangerous when you view it through the lens of George Land's transformation theory.
Oh, break that down for us.
So Land proposed that all living systems, individuals, organizations, entire societies, they all have to go through 3 distinct phases to survive: discovery, growth, and obsolescence.
Okay.
In the discovery phase, you are searching for a connection with your environment, trying to find what works. And once you find it, you hit a break point and enter the growth phase.
Where you stop exploring.
Exactly. You stop exploring and just replicate that connection to get bigger and more efficient. But eventually, growth slows down and you hit obsolescence. At that point, you either reinvent yourself back in the discovery phase or you die.
So think about your own education or your corporate job right now. Weren't you always rewarded for simply following the rules? For hitting your quarterly metrics? For not questioning the premise of the assignment?
Yep, gold stars for compliance.
Exactly. School and corporate life permanently trap us in Land's growth phase. We are relentlessly taught how to replicate and execute, but never how to discover.
And here's why that is so fatal today. The rules for survival and the growth phase are completely maladaptive for the discovery phase.
They actively work against each other.
They do. Managerial systems punish failure, they punish experimentation, and they absolutely abhor ambiguity.
Right.
But failure, experimentation, and ambiguity are the exact mechanisms that drive entrepreneurial discovery.
Right. In the growth phase, a failure is a defect.
But in the discovery phase, a failure is vital beta.
So we have all these really smart people out there facing massive adaptive challenges in their lives. Their industries are shifting, their skills are getting automated by AI.
Yeah.
And they are trying to solve these unmapped problems using a managerial toolkit that demands absolute certainty and a little blue GPS line to follow. It's like trying to use an Excel spreadsheet to paint a masterpiece. It simply doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. We really have to understand how this managerial conditioning actually rewires our brains.
How so?
Well, Edgar Schein's concept of culture explains how this happens on an individual level. Think of your mindset not as an iceberg, which is the usual cliche, but as the operating system on your smartphone.
Okay, I like that.
Level 1 is your visible behavior, the apps you physically tap every day. Level 2 represents your espoused values, the things you claim you prioritize, like saying, I value innovation.
But then there's level 3.
Right. Level 3 is the base code. It's the deeply held, totally taken for granted assumptions running silently in the background. And that base code dictates what those apps can actually do. Because our level 3 assumptions were programmed by a managerial society, our brains just operate on a highly efficient autopilot.
And Daniel Kahneman's research explains the biology of why we do this. He talks about System 1, which is our fast automatic thinking, and System 2, our slow, deliberate effort.
Deliberate thought is exhausting.
Exactly. Analytical thought burns a massive amount of calories. The brain is an energy hog, so to save energy, it builds these neural superhighways for routine tasks. That's System 1. And it creates what psychologists call the Einstellung effect.
Yes, the Einstellung effect is when your brain literally routes a brand new problem down an old familiar neural pathway simply because it's cheaper energetically.
Even if it's the wrong answer.
Even if that old pathway leads to the completely wrong answer. Our fast-thinking brains automatically apply outdated managerial rules to novel situations.
It literally blinds us. And you see the mechanics of this perfectly illustrated in that really famous invisible gorilla experiment.
Oh, that one is a classic.
It really is.
Yeah.
Researchers ask people to watch a video of a group passing a basketball back and forth, and they give the viewers a very strict managerial task count, the exact number of passes.
A routine execution-based task.
Right. And right in the middle of the video, a person in a full gorilla suit walks directly into the frame, beats their chest, and just walks off. And half the people watching never even see the gorilla.
Because their cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by the routine task of counting.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, think about your own inbox right now. When you are hyper-focused on achieving inbox 0 or maximizing your daily productivity hacks.
Which is really just counting the basketball passes.
Exactly. What massive disruptive gorilla is walking right past your desk while you stare at your screen? We are so busy efficiently executing that we literally lose the cognitive ability to explore.
I'm mentally taking notes here because what's really fascinating is how this suppression directly destroys human motivation.
Oh, totally.
For decades, the managerial water we swam in relied on B.F. Skinner's behaviorist approach, the carrot and stick.
Reward good behavior with a bonus, punish bad behavior with a demotion.
Right. It assumes people are inherently lazy and have to be controlled. But psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan revolutionized our understanding of motivation with self-determination theory.
Oh, this is huge.
They proved that human beings inherently crave 3 basic psychological nutrients: autonomy, competency, and relatedness, which is essentially purpose.
When you put someone in a modern pin factory, managing their micro movements and just hitting them with carrots and sticks, you obliterate their autonomy.
Yes, and people become completely alienated from their work.
But everyday entrepreneurs, they naturally satisfy these 3 needs. They have the autonomy to direct their own experiments, they build competency through real-world trial and error, and they find profound relatedness by solving actual problems for other people.
Which triggers a state that psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls being autotelic. They become optimally engaged, driven entirely from within.
They aren't sitting around waiting for a manager to tell them what to do.
Exactly. They are deeply engaged in discovery.
Okay, so we've cleared away the myths. We know the entrepreneurial drive isn't genetic. We know we've been swimming in managerial water that blinds us with the Einstellung effect.
Yes.
And we know our brains are starving for autonomy, competency, and purpose. Now, how do we practically execute this? Like, how do everyday people uncover these hidden opportunities without risking total ruin?
Well, they do it by completely ignoring traditional business school advice. They absolutely do not use the standard plan and pitch method.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let me stop you there, because we are constantly told that, failing to plan is planning to fail.
It's the most common advice out there.
You're supposed to write a massive 50-page business plan, map out your 5-year financial projections, and go pitch investors. Are you saying this book argues that if you don't have funding or experience, a business plan is basically just a well-documented illusion?
This raises an important question. Why do we plan in the first place?
Okay.
Harvard's Ronald Heifetz makes a vital mechanical distinction here between technical problems and adaptive challenges.
Right.
A technical problem has a known solution. If your car's engine dies, you take it to a mechanic. You can plan for it. But an adaptive challenge is ill-structured. There is no known solution. It requires ongoing experimentation.
So writing a massive business plan treats an unpredictable, unmapped, adaptive challenge as if it were just a simple technical problem.
Exactly. It's like trying to draw a highly detailed street map of a continent that hasn't even finished forming yet.
That is a great way to put it.
Amar Bideh researched the founders of massive, established companies and found that they almost never started with a grand, world-changing vision and millions in venture capital.
No.
They started with tiny, somewhat ambiguous niche ideas. And they started with an average of about $10,000 cobbled together from savings and credit cards.
Wow, just 10,000.
Yeah. They relied entirely on rapid iteration, not long-term foresight.
It comes down to the difference between causal reasoning and effectual reasoning.
Right.
Causal reasoning is deeply managerial. It's a know-before-you-go strategy. You define the exact goal, you gather all the specific resources you need, and then you execute the plan.
Which only works if the environment is stable.
Exactly. But effectual reasoning is the hidden logic of the entrepreneur. It's a go-in-order-to-know strategy. You take whatever limited resources you have right in front of you, you run a small, cheap experiment, and you let the real-world results dictate your very next move.
Let's talk about Elias Ruiz, because his story is the perfect embodiment of this effectual reasoning.
Oh, the boat guy.
Yes. Elias is a 6th grade science teacher who loves to bow fish. But he had a really highly specific problem. He needed a boat that was light enough for him to carry to the river alone, but stable enough that he could stand up on it to shoot fish.
Because kayaks were too tippy and traditional boats were way too heavy?
Exactly. Notice his starting point here. He didn't quit his teaching job. He didn't go to the bank seeking a massive small business loan. He simply identified an unarticulated problem in his own life.
Right. And for his minimally viable product as MVP, he didn't hire an expensive engineering firm. He took a sheet of plywood and he literally tied dozens of empty 2-liter plastic soda bottles to the bottom of it.
It's so scrappy.
He tested it in a friend's pool and it floated, but it was too hard to steer in the river current. So he iterated. He tried using expanding spray foam.
But that was messy and didn't hold up.
Right. Eventually, he glued 2 slabs of solid foam together and coated them in a hard polymer spray.
He is physically moving through the 3 distinct phases of entrepreneurial discovery here. Exploration, which is finding the problem and developing empathy for it. Experimentation, putting a cheap hypothesis into the world. And finally, replication.
Exactly. He is taking his polymer-coated foam raft to the river one day, and a total stranger walks up to him and asks, "Where did you buy that?"
The ultimate validation.
But that was the light bulb moment. Elias realized his personal solution was actually a market opportunity. He threw a simple, cheap ad on social media, found a paying customer, and suddenly he had a real business, all built in his spare time.
What is crucial to understand about the mechanism of Elias's success is that his severe lack of resources was actually his greatest advantage.
How so?
Because he had no money to lose, he was forced into micro-experimentation. He had to gather evidence directly from the environment. If he had secured $1 million loan on day one, he probably would have built a massive factory to produce a boat that nobody actually wanted to buy.
The constraint is the catalyst. That is such a powerful reframe. So bringing this all together for you, the listener, what Schoeniger's deep dive reveals is that entrepreneurship is absolutely not about jumping off a cliff and trying to build a parachute on the way down.
No, it is not about reckless gambling.
It is a highly disciplined, evidence-based process of discovery. It is about empathy. It's about looking closely at the world around you, spotting an unarticulated need, and using whatever limited, scrappy resources you have right now to run a small, low-risk experiment.
And stepping out of the managerial water.
Exactly. Recognizing the water we've been swimming in our whole lives and consciously choosing to step out of it.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We mentioned Adam Smith earlier. Centuries ago, he observed that all humans live by exchanging. That is the fundamental biological nature of our society.
Variant.
So ask yourself, what is the useful thing that you are exchanging right now? And who are you exchanging it with? Are you blindly following a script written by an industrial manager from the 19th century, just keeping your head down and counting the basketball passes? Or are you ready to engage your own innate entrepreneurial discovery process, step off the map terrain, and unleash your true potential?
When the map disappears, you don't just sit in the car and wait for a signal. You get out, you survey the terrain, and you start walking. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.